What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Comic Source. My name is Billy, and today we're going to be talking about Marvel's latest series, Moon Knight. Overall, I definitely liked Moon Knight a lot. It was a very interesting portrayal of Moon Knight from Oscar Isaac. I'm glad that in this phase of the MCU that they're really targeting mental health rather than just some big bad. And something that happens plenty of times throughout the series is something that really impresses me no matter who does it. And that's when they switch back and forth between the characters that they're playing. But not only do they switch back and forth, they switch back and forth while within the same shot. Something else that's truly impressive in this show is the editing and the pacing. I really thought that the way that they went through everybody's point of view at the beginning and then the way that their two stories kind of just merged into one and we were following them in the same place, it was really well fleshed out. And something else that I saw somebody point out that all of the Disney Plus shows so far, the villain is sort of up to your interpretation. It's not clear cut. It's not like there's just some big murderer that we need to go capture. Like in Loki, is he who remains the villain for keeping the timeline captive, so to speak, or is Sylvie the villain for disrupting the balance of that timeline? And then in WandaVision, is Agatha the villain for everything that she did, or is Wanda the villain for what she did to the town? And then now here, is Khonshu the villain for manipulating Mark, or is Arthur the villain for following Amit? And then in Hawkeye, they didn't even know. I'm not even going to talk about that. But starting with episode 1, I'm not going to go back through and point out every little thing in the episode because, that's what New Rockstars is for. I'm just here for the things that really stood out to me. And the scene that really stood out to me in that episode was when Steven is ordering his steak. Now, it might seem corny, but the way that that scene was written and the way that Oscar Isaac portrayed that sadness was really just something else. I don't know, take it how you want, but that scene really stood out to me. But the editing and the pacing that I was talking about before really comes to fruition in this episode specifically, with it cutting in and out, switching back and forth between the different personalities. This is another writing technique that I really like, where they use a character that doesn't understand what's going on to flesh out some exposition for the audience. They're learning as we're learning. But the pacing comes to a magnificent peak when they're in the car chase, and then he ends up driving backwards down the mountain. It's a really intense scene, and I'm really interested to see if in season 2, it's both Steven and Mark in this kind of fish out of water scenario when Jake Lockley is taken over. And we definitely got some good fight choreography in the first episode. I love how visceral the fight is with the jackal at the end. The walk towards the camera, you could think about that how you want. It's a little bit corny, but the suit looks cool. When this episode concluded, I really felt relieved. I felt like, we're in good hands. I haven't had any problems besides, Hawkeye with the Disney Plus shows, but I'm just glad that we're keeping this up. We're keeping this A+ material up. And towards the beginning of episode 2, we get more of the exposition through a character where Steven and Layla are having a conversation about their different adventures that they had gone on, and that just piques the curiosity for the audience. While I'm not going to be remiss if they don't include this in the second season, as we're fully deep into their stories in the present day. But if we go back to the beginning and see how Mark and Layla met, how their relationship started, those adventures, I would love that. And then this goes the same for Arthur being the avatar for Khonshu. I would love to see how that worked out. And then of course we get the first sighting of the Mr. Knight suit. I love it. It's just so clean. I mean, who doesn't love a tuxedo, right? And then along with seeing the Mr. Knight suit for the first time, we also get to see him fight a little bit, which that definitely got me cackling when he threw that right cross and then he threw the line out, the float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, my name is Steven with a V. And then with the ending of this episode, I'm very curious. Because while we have that shot of him in the hotel room when he was drinking on the floor, in the mirror, he's sitting on the bed. So I'm wondering if one of those is Mark and then the other one is Jake. I could be completely wrong on this, but still. Because the way that he was sitting, and I know that's a huge reach, but the way that he was sitting, it just didn't feel like Steven. Like, it didn't feel like that was Steven sitting on the bed and then Mark on the floor. And then at the beginning of episode 3, we get just a little bit more of what I was talking about, where Layla's getting her passport, and then we get a little bit more of her backstory, stuff about her father. I'm very interested in all of this. And then again, they do the magnificent switch of Mark's in the middle of a fight, and then Steven takes over and we pop up in a cab. And this part of the series was just really interesting to me. Initially, I thought we were going to get an entire episode that was similar to episode 1, but it was more just from Mark's perspective. And he's making progress on a mission or something, and then Steven takes away all that progress, and then we have to see how that works out. But they seem to have a real handle on when they wanted to switch it back and forth, and I'm not going to play with that. And also just wanted to point out how cool these shots looked of Khonshu when we were below the car. Khonshu is just a really cool character with a dope voice. And it really helps that he's just like a little bit childish. That adds to the character quite a bit. And then in the scene of the trial of the gods, where Khonshu is trying to plead to the gods that Harrow is going after Amit, and they don't believe him, that's the obvious dramatic irony in the scenario, right? But I'm more interested in the dressing down of Mark and Steven's situation, which is, the the meat and potatoes of this entire series. And it's just another instance of Oscar Isaac delivering a masterpiece of a performance. And then they finally gave us a big fight where we got to see Moon Knight in full action. And while there was just a little bit too much cutting for me, I really like the one take fight scenarios. But I mean, granted, it doesn't fully work here, but I would have liked some longer takes on this fight choreography. But still, I'm not nitpicking. I loved how it worked out. And then, of course, you have the added argument between Mark and Steven going back and forth, who's taking the body. It's just perfect. And then we get the starting point of Mark and Steven starting to trust each other with the amazing visuals of Mr. Knight and Khonshu rotating the sky back to the point where they needed. And holy shit, that looked amazing. And I'm very curious to see how much of the budget went to that, as well as the scene I'm going to be talking about later on. And then moving on to episode 4, I really like the semi-thriller horror themes that they pulled off in this episode. Obviously, it's nothing too scary, but it's definitely intense. And they definitely work a lot of suspense into this episode. And of course, we do have other scenes to highlight for the rest of the series, but Layla's conversation with Harrow is just another instance of her performance in this series was incredible. And this was one of the scenes that I wanted to highlight as far as that goes. And I wonder how they're going to be working her character from now on. Because it seems like her presence is too powerful to just be a side character. She's somebody that I feel like deserves her own series, but I know that we're going through a lot of series that are coming out and scheduling conflict. Anything could spread that thin. So she would just have to work within Moon Knight, which is fine. But I hope that they give her her due. But I also can't not point this out. Something that I am tired of in movies and TV is the whole, I fell off the cliff. Oh, but wait, I didn't fall off the cliff. Can we stop doing that? Can we do something else to raise suspense? Like, we all know that you didn't just kill off a character by falling off a cliff. We know you didn't. So don't play with our intelligence. It's a cliche that I can't stand. I'm sorry. But of course, Arthur shoots Mark, and we get plunged into the reasoning behind why he built the Steven Grant persona. Or at least why it's the Steven Grant persona. Not why he built it, but why it is what it is. And that's because he was just a character from a movie that he had watched. And man, this mental hospital was trippy. Because, of course, they connect the passport scene at the beginning with the mental hospital because Layla is eating a marshmallow in both scenarios, which is weird. But, wow. I love when shows actually play with my head like this. And then, of course, we see Arthur Harrow, the doctor, for the first time, which leads to Mark trying to run away, obviously. And then, of course, he comes across Steven inside of his sarcophagus, pulls him out, and then we see a different sarcophagus, which we all know is Jake, right? I'm not bugging here. That has to be Jake Lockley. But then, of course, the both of them run into Taweret, and then that's how we end the show. Which leads us to what is usually the best episode in a lot of series, the episode before the finale. That's always the episode that goes crazy. And this one is very similar in regards to WandaVision, where they were working through trauma. And of course, in a similar vein to WandaVision's episode 5, this episode was extremely heavy and emotional. But something that I'm curious about with Taweret at the beginning when she was talking about the different planes and she mentions the ancestral plane. And I'm just curious as to whether or not this is the same ancestral plane that is in Black Panther. Probably not. There, of course, there would be multiple ancestral planes. It's different cultures entirely, but you never know. And then, of course, we get another example of a gray line where Steven and Mark come across the memory of Mark becoming the Moon Knight. And you ask yourself the question, is Khonshu the manipulator or is Mark somebody that just wants to be a killer? And I feel like me personally, I probably lean more towards Khonshu as a manipulator because, if Mark really wanted to be a killer, if he was really that bad of a person, then that's what he would be doing rather than what he was doing in that scene, which was coming to the realization of what he had done and he just wanted to end it all. And of course, maybe the injuries that he had sustained were bigger than I had understood from that scene, and he would have died anyway, but I definitely lean more towards it. Khonshu is the manipulator. But of course, it's not only his becoming of Moon Knight that we look at in the flashbacks that we had. We also see the reason why Steven came to fruition. And while there's more obvious scenes to pick, including the scene of his mother saying that it's his fault, and then the scene of her beating him, that doesn't need any extra words. We all know how that makes us feel. We all know how that is. We all know that people go through that and it's awful. And those were some heavy, heavy sequences. And it's just something that they were kind of not really highlighting in the MCU before. And then, of course, throughout all of this, you have Oscar Isaac acting his heart out. Just a brilliant performance from him, through in and throughout. And of course, whilst learning the reasoning for Steven to come about. We see the aha moment when he did come about the first time. And then, of course, this just adds on to the layers that we've already had. Something I'm curious about is who Steven was talking on the phone with in the first place. But the scales deem their soul unworthy, and then now Mark is supposed to be dragged down into the dunes. And I really liked how they worked this, where you can't necessarily have Steven go through some training montage and just rocky this stuff out where, like he starts learning different martial arts and stuff like that. No, he just had a moment where he realized if Mark can do it, I can do it. And I love that because, of course, that leads into the next episode where we see some advanced fight choreography from him. But this definitely was the best episode by far. Like I said before, I'm really glad that Marvel is taking this mental health route because it's important, it needs to be talked about, and we can't just ignore this stuff. But we move on to the finale, which surprisingly was the shortest episode of the bunch at a runtime of 44 minutes. But of course, we get another mention, or a slight mention of Jake Lockley, where Arthur says Stephen Grant, Mark Spector, whoever else might be in there, which is just really cool. I can't wait to see Jake in season 2. But while I definitely liked this finale, I definitely enjoyed it, I feel like it was definitely carried by the performances of Oscar Isaac and May, as well as the cinematography. I remember walking at work the next day and thinking to myself, what actually happened in the episode? I had to go back and watch it because it was just a bunch of bright lights and stuff happening, which I guess I can't be too mad about because in the same vein as before, when I said that Marvel is targeting more emotional and mental health issues rather than some big bad, this is the other side of that, where the conclusion is going to be mostly emotional and the physical side of it just seems kind of weird. But this is the other scene that I was talking about before with Layla, where she finally gave into Taweret and became her avatar. And her performance in this scene is just crazy. But of course, we get the scene of Arthur freeing Amit, which looked great. I wonder how much of the budget went to this one, like I was saying before. I feel like with how perfect the CG was in this episode, they definitely offloaded a lot of the budget to this. But we also get here a line that kind of encapsulates the motif of the series, which is do not let the pain of the past control you. That's what Mark's trying to learn this entire time. That's the connection between Mark and Steven, and also the connection between Arthur and Khonshu, the connection between Arthur and Amit. It really encapsulates the whole series. And when Layla comes out in her suit, that was tremendous. And I say that because I saw somebody on social media that is also Egyptian, and her daughter has very similar hair to Layla. And the person that posted it said that for all of her life, she's always wanted to straighten her hair because she doesn't like how curly it is. But they said that once Layla walked out with that suit on, her eyes lit up and she loves her hair because she saw somebody on screen that's powerful that had her hair. And this is why representation matters. You can say all you want about forcing it in. I don't care. Representation matters. And if you think otherwise, recheck your personal biases. But moving on to the physical part of the finale, I definitely heard Deadpool a couple times in my head when I was watching this with big CG fight coming right up. But while I'm making fun of how the fight went kind of, a little bit, tiny bit, the cinematography in it was great. The CG looked perfect. The shot of Taweret taking down Khonshu as Arthur takes down Moon Knight, tremendous. And I loved how they upgraded the choreography, as I was saying before, for Steven specifically, because he finally got his moment where he was able to take down a bunch of bad guys. And I wonder how much of the fighting he's going to take in season 2. Because, of course, in the entirety of season 1, before he got this moment, he was more of the knowledge side of it, where he was really intelligent with the different Egyptian artifacts and identifying what they mean, what we need to do, while Mark was more of the physical side of it. But I wonder how much more of the physical side of it Steven's going to be able to access in the season 2, or at least how many scenes they're going to write for him. But then we get the conclusion of the emotional debate between Amit and Khonshu, where Amit's form of justice doesn't really give people an opportunity to grow and be able to change before they commit an unspeakable crime. And then, of course, on the flip side of that, Khonshu almost dives down to her level, but Mark finally stands up for himself and says, if you want to do it, you do it yourself. Which was a huge point for Mark as a character because now this highlights him as somebody that's not a killer. He is a good person. And of course, this gets wrapped up back in the doctor's office, where Arthur is confused as to why his feet are bleeding, and Mark and Steven just get to take their leave and go. And when he wakes up in his bed, of course, they're playing the same song that they had played in episode 1, which is that's cool. I like that. But then, of course, we get a post-credit scene of Jake Lockley wheeling Arthur out to the car, where Khonshu reveals that Jake has kind of been his confidant or his silent accomplice in the series. And I'm so excited for this. Because while I don't know much about Jake Lockley from the comics, I do know a fair amount from just what people have highlighted as this series has come out. And it seems like he's, you know, the coolest of them all. And then, of course, when he shoots Arthur, he gives him 4 shots. One for Steven, one for Mark, one for himself. And then you could say the 4th one's for Khonshu, but the 4th one's just cuz. That's me. I think it's just cuz. But I definitely enjoyed Moon Knight as a whole. I can't wait for the next season. I heard that they're going to be trying to introduce Black Suit for Jake Lockley's character, which I think is going to be really interesting. But of course, I did read that Moon Knight, he wears white because he wants the criminals to be able to see him coming. So I'm not sure how a Black Suit kind of works with that. But if it looks cool, who cares? But we're going to have a busy next few weeks, as I'm going to be having my Doctor Strange review coming up next Tuesday, as well as a video on which comics The Batman starring Robert Pattinson made me read, as well as a review on the movie and how those comics connect to the movie, and my thoughts overall on how that movie played out. And then on top of that, starting this Wednesday, we're going to be having the Lego Star Wars series, which unfortunately I had been planning to do a co-op series with TKD 123, but unfortunately they don't have online co-op. So it's just going to be your boy. But hey, we're going to have a fun time. I haven't played Lego Star Wars since I was a kid. I'm really hyped for the remaster. I heard it was really good. I haven't looked at it at all because I want everything to be fresh when I'm playing it. So I'm really excited about that. Episode 1's going to be coming out on Wednesday. But besides that, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought about my thoughts in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Peace.